Sports Radio 95.3 FM and 1350 AM, The Ticket. This is Bronco Focus with the voice of Boise State Athletics, Bob Behler.
Your chance to win Michael Franti tickets coming up next hour. But first, this is Bronco Focus. We turned the video cameras on in the RowPaint.com studio. And Bob, over-under win totals are out in the desert for every college football team. We've seen, and we looked at all the casinos today, all the prognosticators for over-under win totals for Boise State. We've seen as low as 7.5. We've seen as high as 9. Let's just split that in the middle. Boise State's win-loss, and a lot of places have it at 8, meaning that they're saying Boise State's probably going to go 8-4 in the regular season. And you can say if you think they're going to have more than 8 wins or less than 8 wins. You've called every football game for the last 15 years, Bobby. What's your take on this? 8-4?
Oh, first off, I'll say just gut feeling, I'm thinking that they're going to win more than 8.
Okay.
But whenever I look at numbers, and it could be maybe somebody like New Mexico on the bottom end, and maybe their number's 3 or 4, and you're trying to think, okay, where are they going to get their wins? When you look at teams in the higher numbers, it's to me, who's going to beat them or who's going to be capable of beating them? So I think that's the way I'm going to attack it and see, okay, how did these people come to the fact that Boise State's going to lose 4 games? And where do they think those 4 games are going to come? And let's start with the top.
Number one.
I think the game on the schedule that is going to be the most difficult to win this year is Washington in the opener.
Okay.
They return a Heisman caliber quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. They return 2,000-yard receivers that both had more than 75 catches last season. They won 11 games last season. They're projected to be in the top 10 this year. It's going to be a home opener in Seattle. You're going to have to go on the road. I think this team that Washington's going to put on the field will be either the best or the second best opening team that Boise State has faced. The only team that I think might be better than what this Husky team is going to have, at least in the preseason, is the Virginia Tech team from 2010, as far as in the opening game of the season. So I think if you're looking at a 12-game schedule and saying, taking a look at each of them in a vacuum, not taking into account injuries or maybe somebody's got a short week heading into a game, but just looking at on the surface, which is going to be the most difficult game, I think you got to go with the one in Seattle first.
Bob, okay, since you've been on the call 15 years, and I know there was the opener against Virginia Tech, neutral site, opener against
Alleged
Georgia, neutral site. Well,
more
not in that team's stadium.
Correct.
Is this in your career with Boise State in Husky Stadium week 1? Is this potentially the most challenging week 1 that you've ever been a part of here?
They went to Husky Stadium back,
13.
I want to say it was 13.
10 years ago.
And that was a big, tough.
You had Pete, though. But
yes. But that Boise State did not do well that day. I think it was
they didn't.
I don't think they got a touchdown.
The Robert Prince game.
And the other one that was a big atmosphere was Michigan State.
Oh,
we went there.
Yeah, okay. That was week 1.
Was week 1.
Okay.
So, but I think this one is going to be the toughest game of the season, and you could see why probably the experts are thinking that it may fall in the loss column.
Number two.
I think there's a big gap from Washington to anybody else. I love Boise State on the blue, but I think based on what the teams have back, what talent they have, acquired via the transfer, I'm going to have to put UCF as the second toughest game on the schedule. Boise State lost to UCF in 2021 in Coach Avalos' first game. They've got a returning starting quarterback in John Reese Plumlee. They've got one of his top receivers back. They run the ball well, and I'm going to give you a number doing some research. When UCF runs for 160 yards or more in the last 2 seasons with Malzahn as coach, they are 17-2. If they've been held under 160 yards rushing, they are 1-7. So I think running the ball, they like to run the ball. They're going to have a stable of running backs, much like Boise State, a number of people to carry the ball. But I just think that, again, in a vacuum, looking at the game, looking at the opponent, I like the fact Boise State is at home. I think this game compared to Washington, we got a gap from 1 to 2. But I think UCF will be the second toughest team on paper coming into the game this season against Boise State.
I feel like if there's one game on the schedule, gosh, that you just stinking need to win to set you up for everything else. I feel like it's week 2, home opener, UCF, Bob. I think that is of the utmost importance, and I think you probably agree with me on that one.
Number 3.
Number 3.
3.
Number 3.
And again, we're picking the 4 toughest games on the schedule based on the fact most of the casinos say that Boise State's going to go 8-4 this year.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I really get down to trying to decide. And to me, it's between Memphis, San Diego State, and Fresno State. And I'm going to give the nod to Memphis because they've got a returning starter back at quarterback. The other 2 teams do not, who in the last 2 seasons has been a starter and thrown for almost 7,000 yards. It's going to be a long trip. Probably won't be quite as hot and humid the last weekend in September than, say, the first weekend in September. But I don't know. I just think Memphis has a little more back than San Diego State and Fresno State, and I'm going to put the Tigers game as number 3.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, and I haven't took a deep dive yet into Memphis. I do know that's a long trip. I believe, is that the Eastern time zone, Bob?
Central
time zone. Must be
Sits right on the Mississippi River.
Mississippi. Okay, Liberty Bowl, long trip. Don't know much about him. I'll give you that one. Memphis, number 3 on this list.
Number 4.
Number 4.
4.
Number 4.
And I'm going to give the nod to San Diego State as the 4th toughest game. It's going to be a road game. It's going to be on a Friday night. San Diego State does have a returning quarterback in Jalen Maiden. Now, quarterback is a much more important position in the offense at Fresno State. They'll have a new quarterback. A lot will change because the game with Fresno is in the first weekend in November, so both teams will be very different. If you looked at Boise State's team last year going into the Oregon State game and then looked at it in the first week in November, completely different team with completely different quarterback, completely different style. San Diego State's usually good defensively, although I don't think they're going to be as good this year as they've been in the past. They lost a lot of people in the linebacker and defensive line to graduation or to the pros. And I think San Diego State, first game of the season in the league, would come in at 4, with Fresno State sitting just outside the top 4 of most toughest games on the season.
JP, do you see the common denominator in Bob's list here, pal?
I do not.
Every single one of these games falls in the month of September.
Whoops.
Think about that. There's Bob Behler. There's Bronco Focus. Appreciate it, Bob. Well done. A reverse boycott. What have you ever done to show your dissatisfaction with your team? You cancel tickets? Do you pull the JP? Do you send them an email? Do you have a picket sign? What do? Well, what the Oakland A's are doing to prove to its ownership that they are not the problem, it's historic and it's really entertaining. Let's hop on that. Plus, Michael Franti tickets. You want to go? Keep that phone handy. Behler's in for Prater. KTIK, the ticket.
Sports Radio 95.3.